36 hours of staying up straight through. So that was, from my perspective, a bad bill. There was also a very bad, for my bill, a bill regarding sheriff decredentialing. Basically, we give an administrative agency over there in Olympia the power to pick and choose who gets to serve as your sheriff here in Pend Oreille County. And I'm happy to talk more about that. There were some wins for our district from my perspective. Right here in Pend Oreille County, we were very fortunate and successful in getting a bill for the Port of Pend Oreille County across the finish line. This is a bill that would have, if we had not been able to get a statutory fix to it, would have created a really significant financial burden on the port itself and the port workers. Amazingly, it required a statutory fix to it, but we were able to get that across the finish line, one of the last bills of the session. I was really happy with being able to get our family burial ground bill across the finish line. So this is important to farmers, ranchers, tribal members, people who have strong connections to the land, where if given the choice to be buried out on the South 40 or buried at the cemetery out in town, they'd rather be buried on the farm or the ranch or in a place of importance to the tribal community. So very happy about that. It's also able to get a bill that will help the electronic notarization of documents. Sometimes you've got to get a document notarized, get a legal notary to put the seal on the document. Now we can do that electronically, physical pieces of paper, which is good for those of us who live in rural areas. And then also was very happy to get a veterans bill across the finish line. One personal high point, and then I'll turn it over by Representative Engell and Commissioner Center, is that my daughter Libby, many of you have met her, 12-year-old, but she sang the national anthem to convene the legislature this session. So that was pretty cool. She's been taking lessons for a while. She admitted she was pretty nervous. I was real nervous for her. She went out there and she just sang to the rafters and blew the dome off the building. So I was really happy about that. So with that, I'm sure it'll pay Andrew.
All right, good to see you all tonight. Thanks for coming out. It's we really enjoy these kind of events. It gives us the opportunity to engage directly with people of all political persuasions and interests, just whoever wants to come and take your questions. It's part of how representative government is supposed to work. So it's thank you for taking time out of an evening. I know it's lots of things going on, lots of competing things, and this is a good crowd here in Cusick. I was going to try to do it in Newport, couldn't find anywhere to have it, but this is a great location, so it worked out well. What I think, Hunter did a great job talking about some of those, a couple of the really high controversial bills. One thing that's noteworthy, I think, is that most of the bills that we pass out of the legislature are really not partisan. There's a lot of focus on how you run the government. It just takes work to run a government, and some of your county electeds here, they know that, UD commissioners, and so that's why I see like a lot of there's two pieces to being a state legislator in the minority party. One is to make it harder for those in the majority to do their work. You're looking for those cracks in their ideas. You're making it so that they can't just be lazy and push stuff that's really bad policy out. Now they're in the majority, so ultimately they get what they want most of the time. But we are trying to slow them down. Sometimes we can stop things because we show enough of a problem or enough of you testify or sign in that they realize, oh, this might not be safe to do politically, and they'll back off. So that's one important part of any minority party, really, in any state. But the other piece is to try to bring common sense. Our district is extremely unique, covering 20% of the landmass in the state with 2% of the people. Even if Republicans were in charge, we'd have a really important job of making sure that the super rural areas, incredible places like this, are represented, because a lot of the bills come through and they're trying to solve a problem in Seattle or Issaquah or Bellevue or Olympia, and it may cause an unintended problem for Cusick. Not partisan, it's just how it works, and so it's important for us to do that. That's where I think there's a lot of good bills that we had this year that we worked on, all three of us, trying to just bring that common sense in, and that's what I get excited about.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I would like to say with appreciation, thank you, first of all, for showing up, but thank you for participating. We had tremendous participation in committees, people signing in for or opposed bills, and we've had a lot of folks say, does that really make a difference? It does. And while, yes, they did shove the income tax bill through, by the way, over 100,000 people signed up in a 48-hour period opposed. And yes, they didn't listen, but I will tell you in instances where they did, we don't have an initiative bill that would have made it tremendously hard, I think next to impossible to run initiatives for the people to run their initiatives in the state of Washington. We called it the Initiative Killer 2.0 bill. We had one last year. It didn't make it through. I will say that people showed up, they signed up, they kept pressure. We never saw that bill come to the floor. We thought it might. We were ready to go with the constitutional arguments, things that we felt made it not workable, and we were ready to go with that. But thankfully, people continued to talk to other members' offices. They made phone calls, they sent notes, and it worked. The bill never came up on the floor. In fact, we had 35 bills that did not come up on the Senate floor that we were able to kill. Again, there are a lot of good bills, but these particularly were very troublesome. Were we able to do that to everything we didn't like? No. But I want you to know that your advocacy and how you participate, it does make a difference even when it gets really frustrating. We get frustrated too. But it was very heartening to see people stand up and say, you know, absolutely not. And we've got work to do. I think in a constitutional republic, we continue to have work to do to make sure that people are heard and that people are listened to. From my vantage point, the bills, wildfire funding, hugely critical. It was even before we saw the lack of winter that we had, but it was called 1168 funding. That was the bill that started it several years ago, which put funding into forest health, prescribed fire working, you know, coordination with fire districts, just pre-positioning of firefighting assets, and making sure there were more airplanes. The cool thing, got to take a shout out to Representative Dent. There was a bill that was tried last year, firefighting, where local fire districts could call up those aviation assets when they needed them. They were first on the fire. His bill made it permanent, and it was signed into law. That is a huge thing, folks. When we think you know, we're a wildfire state, but you look at this past winter, I think we're going to be seeing some more of that. Really, really happy that DNR has the money it needs. Conservation districts, working with landowners. There are things we can do individually. There are things communities can do. Obviously, we feel very strongly about the state responsibility as well. And that leads into working on the homeowners insurance with the wildfire risk. Those two bills did not make it entirely through the process, but we've made a good start. Again, most of it is the insurance company having to share with you how they rated your property. That's number one. Number two, appealing that decision. Number three is if you invest time and resources in making your place less fire, you know, more fire resistant, communities do it, fire districts help, the state helps, there should be, you should get that should be a benefit. That should be reflective in your rates. So we're gonna keep at that. That's still a huge priority of mine. And although we didn't see it get to the governor's desk this year, we're teeing it up for next year. And just so, thank you so much for sending us to Olympia to do work for you and to fight for you and to make sure that your voices are being heard. And it's an honor to be here tonight.
All right, so we don't have a real strong format here. We're gonna do what we've done a little bit in the past. We're just gonna ask you if you've got a question, throw your hands in the air. We'll just kind of rotate through and call on people. But you know, what's on your mind? Yes, sir.
So this fire thing is obviously a hot issue. What happens when you take these concerns to the state insurance offices? Where do we start as a state to put the leverage on these insurance companies? Unless you're a hobby farmer or bigger, you can't get the range insurance that I was able to get. But the rest of it, what can we do to put more heat and pressure on our insurance commissioner to get these state regulations? For example, if you're in this state and you want to do business in this state, here's the deals you got to do with regards to fire, like tax credits and lower rates if you've done certain mitigation. Would you talk to that a little bit more?
Sure, absolutely. Great point, Bill. Thank you. So the bills I was talking about were actually introduced as agency request legislation. The insurance commissioner, those were her bills. We took them and presented them to the legislature. And, you know, she is absolutely incredibly concerned about that. And the bills would help her do exactly what you're talking about, making sure that there's pushback and there's just frankly reasoned ways that we can work through these things. You know, insurance companies they are in the risk business. And the way it is right now is you and I and everybody else bears that entire burden. That's not appropriate. There are things that I think we can do and should do as homeowners and businesses and all do our part that helps their bottom line. You know, that really, if we're reducing risk, that reduces their need potentially for having to pay out. So I will say she's super committed to that, and she sees holes in that system right now, and that's what those bills were designed to start to address.
Thank you.
So, you bet.
Question?
Question? Yes.
Just recently, like I think it was like March 23rd, the federal government announced that they were working with 8 states as far as right here. Just gonna disappear on me. Anyway, it was, they had $115 million across 8 states to the timber production expansion. And that was March 23rd, 2026. The closest one to us, I think, was maybe Idaho or something. And part of that was to reduce wildfire risk
Oh, sure.
and to expand American timber production 25% and save American lives. Are we in Washington State going to be able to take part in that at some point in the future?
Don't exactly know how that was framed. It might, so I will say, I mean, we're in a situation, but the Cobble National Forest, which we're all surrounded by, has really done pretty well over the years with having additional funding that, has I've seen a lot of lands harvested and managed and all of that in areas like I've never seen it before. And so I don't know if they're trying to get it in the hands of, say, forests that haven't had as active a management. I would have to check with our federal folks.
Yeah, that was the
To see.
Advanced Bioeconomy Leadership Conference. And
Okay.
they announced that today. It was through the Department of Agriculture
Sure.
Administration and Rural Business and Cooperative
Oh, cool.
Services.
No, that's awesome. Anything, all of the above. Absolutely, I can check on it. Thank you for bringing
I
that
was
up.
gonna say Congressman Baumgartner's office may also be a good point of
Sure,
contact on that
absolutely.
for purposes of our homework.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's encouraging. What's that? Okay, next question? Yes, sir.
I didn't get a chance to ask you earlier, probably a question for Hunter. I'm trying to wrap my head around the AG expanded powers bill and how that might adversely affect counties. I can't really come up with anything. What are they saying up on the hill? What should we be looking out for?
Great question. Thank you so much. I'm gonna build the soapbox here, hop up on top of it, and talk all night. No, I'm kidding. I'm not actually gonna do that. This has been something I've been talking and thinking about a lot. Let me take a step back and just explain a little bit about what the commissioner's talking about here. So we debated and ultimately the legislature passed and the governor signed a bill this session. It was called the Attorney General's Civil Investigative Demand Bill, called CIDs. And CIDs are basically think of it as like a subpoena that the Attorney General under this bill can now go around to any faith organization, nonprofit, small business, you name it, county government, portion of a county government, say a sheriff's department, and issue this civil investigative demand, again, think of it as a subpoena, for information, records, documents. They can actually also make you come in and provide sworn testimony under oath, like a deposition. If the Attorney General office has a reasonable basis to believe that any of those individuals are engaged in a deprivation of any sort of rights under the state constitution or U.S. Constitution, or a violation of something called the Washington Law Against Discrimination, WLAD. So WLAD, from my perspective, is often used as a weapon against faith organizations and faith-based nonprofits. It's a problem where you've got a faith-based nonprofit which has, as part of its statement of mission and statement of faith, is that this is what they do. They engage in, if it's a Christian nonprofit, they engage in propagation of the gospel, that sort of thing. They've got expectations as far as the faith beliefs for the people who are working there in leadership. And WLAD has been weaponized against those types of organizations for a number of years now. Fortunately, there was a recent decision out of the U.S. court system, the Ninth Circuit, which undid a lot of that, which is real good news. But it shows to me that at least here in our state, the courts have been getting it wrong with regard to WLAD and these alleged violations of either state or federal constitutional issues. How it could actually impact a county like Ponderay County, it probably most likely would be aimed at your sheriff's department. If there is even an alleged violation of, it could be issues related to immigration, it could be issues related to any number of different things. And that's part of the problem with the bill, is that there's really no guardrails on it. As long as the Attorney General's office or somebody there has a reasonable basis to believe that there's been a violation of either this WLAD statute or the state constitution or the US Constitution, they can make you come in and answer questions under oath. And the only way to stop it, here's the kicker. The only way to stop it is you have to start a lawsuit and sue your own state government and have a judge put a stop to it. That's the really outrageous thing. So it's a cart before the horse issue. Of course, we all want to protect the US Constitution and the state constitution. Absolutely, that's part of our oath, right? So we get that. The problem is that there's no guardrails on really the discretion of the Attorney General's office to issue these CIDs. And so a really problematic bill. Sort of what I've been talking about with different groups is that sort of my themes for this session have been power grab and cash grab. This is one of the power grabs, and very concerning from my perspective. But I think largely it would be a dagger aimed at county governments, largely through your sheriff's department. That's my theory.
All right, who else has a question?
I'd love to hear your comments or your thoughts, each of you or maybe one of you, regarding the sheriff's bill,
Yeah.
right? I have a lot of angst about that non-elected folks can tell us who we elected can be discertified, and I just have problems with that.
Yeah, that is, we share those concerns, right? It's very offensive, and it's offensive to voters in a community like Ponderay County, where you've elected your sheriff, and who is, the chief law enforcement officer, but also the chief executive officer of the county, to give an unelected bureaucracy, mostly people appointed by the governor, the ability to remove that person from office is, in principle, just a major problem. They've made a lot of other things change in that bill. Some actually are okay, just clarifying language. Some things that are also not great, but that's really the crux of it, is that they are putting restrictions on who can run. Also, once they're in office, they can be removed from office. And so, we have a lot of concerns with it, and we believe it's going to be going to court. The governor, I believe he signed the bill the other day.
So,
did.
yeah.
So, if you want to add more.
I'm happy. Do you want to jump in first? Okay. Yeah. Super disconcerting bill. I think although the bill is structured so that it would be the Criminal Justice Training Commission that could decertify the sheriff, I think we need to call a spade a spade. It allows the governor to decertify the sheriff, because the governor appoints 90% of the members of the CJTC. So that's really concerning from my perspective. I think it undermines public trust and confidence in the system. That when you vote for a candidate and that candidate wins, the expectation from the public is that candidate's going to serve that term without having some bureaucracy or the governor across the mountain say, no, not anymore. Going to pull that rug out from under you. And then also, it's really a solution in search of a problem. Let's be honest about that. If the voters have a problem with the sheriff in their county, well, they can fire him or her at the next election, or they can start a recall process, right, and have a vacancy. And so this is really driven by a lot of anger towards one sheriff, hundreds and hundreds of miles away from here, and yet they've swept us up into this problem, or into this situation as well. So, terrible, terrible bill. Again, another power grab.
Well, it's just, what we see is it's the power grab when there's, those in the majority, they have a different way of looking at it, and they don't want us to think differently, or they don't want us to have the same freedoms to think differently, or the folks that we elect to think differently than they do. And so that was the worst part of session. In my mind, that was the worst bill ever, to take away the hands of the voters who said, we want this individual to represent us in that capacity for that position against what we've all seen this session, which is an out of control, state government. But we saw so many bills on so many levels, which are just designed to quash people who have a difference of opinion. They want theirs to be the rule of law, and they last several years, but this year especially, really are doubling down on that through various bills. We talked about a couple, and I think the sheriff's bill is one of the biggest ones. And it's just that's it's not the way our government structure is set up, but it's the way that if someone stands up and says they don't support something and they go against them, then it's like you start seeing
Right.
these bills
Right.
come forward. They're just-
Exactly, I think it's almost like could be punitive.
Mhm.
If Sheriff Blakesley doesn't do something that the west side feels is important, he can be decertified, and that's just crazy to me.
It is super crazy.
Can I offer one additional thought?
Sure.
And this sort of strikes me as we were talking about the debate, and even just this question. I think there's a huge disconnect between the east side and the west side
Oh, yeah.
about well, we can say that again, right?
Amen.
Tell me, about the role and the importance of especially a rural sheriff. Rural
Amen, that's right.
county. In a lot of our bigger counties, God bless them, our sheriffs are doing wonderful work. And, they have a lot of administrative duties, I think a lot of the legislators sort of think of them as, well, they're a politician down at the courthouse sort of thing. Our sheriffs are out, on patrol,
That's right.
right? They are incredibly important in our rural counties, and so I think we just have a different identification with the office of a sheriff in a rural county than some of our counterparts have.
We do. Hold on just a second. Sir, you had a question? Yes.
Yeah, I'll frame my question a little bit, like come in late, on the way down here. I took my son up Mill Creek Road, we looked at some public lands, and we drove through one parcel, and I said, oh, that's state land. And had a homeschooling moment there, I said, well, why does the state own land? And this goes with the question over here, and we came in, and Andrew, you were talking about, so many of the problems we face, that government faces are not partisan. Totally agree. I think the issues inside of government, largely the problems are not partisan. And some of them are just obvious common sense. But one of the things I'm really concerned about is the management of DNR lands. The management of the DNR force practice rules, force practice board. And I believe those state lands belong to the state for the purpose of gaining revenue for the education for the citizens of Washington State. And they're being managed in such a way that they're turned into a preserve.
Yeah.
So is there anything you guys can do, or we can do, that I think that's a nonpartisan issue, they should be used for revenue? So
Sure.
if you could speak to that a little bit, if you can say anything to that.
Sure. Well, first of all, we had a significant change in lands commissioners, right? They come in, they oversee the state trust lands. You are absolutely right, and the Supreme Court has affirmed that they are to be revenue generating lands. But that's only as good as the person that you place in that position. And, for all of my worry when Hillary Franz was elected, I was like, holy cow, what are we gonna get here? She did some amazing work, a lot in the wildfire space, but she got the connection between wildfire and management of the resource as a way to minimize that risk. Dave Updegrove, I served with him in the legislature early on in my time in the House, and I thought he would be more workable. I still hope he is, but what he's doing is he's putting on the Forest Practices Board, you've got the Board of Natural Resources, you've got the Forest Practices Board, and the changes he's making really undermine that very serious thing. So, you've got the Forest and Fish Rule, there's a lot of environmental organizations that don't believe that works anymore. Well, it doesn't work anymore because they couldn't get what they wanted when they wanted. And it was really a very scientific, holistic look at how lands were to be managed, kind of thing. Well, he's starting to change that, and I've got to say I worry about it. I had a bill, so I don't know if you're aware, several of the state agencies actually sit on that board. And what we found is they vote together. So you'd have ecology, fish and wildlife, you'd have commerce, and there was one other one, I'm not remembering it at the point, but they started voting together as a block. BS on that. So I had a bill several years ago where I made them non-voting members. Because, and as you might expect, they didn't like that very much. The bill was heard, which surprised me. It didn't go anywhere, but my whole, shot across the bow, if you will, was to say, look, you don't know a damn thing about forestry. And you have a role because you've got these regulations, but if you start undermining the process, then you have no right to vote. I mean, that was my position. So we're gonna have to see, what comes of that. I am super concerned. I've had conversations with the commissioner. I'm gonna continue to have those. I don't know how much of it will affect the east side like it affects the west side forest, but we all know, you need, loss of timber there, and the flow of timber affects over here too. So, super, super concerned. And he says he's not ignoring the, the revenue part of forest land management, but I think he's starting to make it very hard. And that's a concern. But thanks for the question.
One just real quick additional observation
Sure.
with regard to that. There's an old line up about where personnel equals policy. And, Senator Short mentioned that we've got a new lands commissioner. One of the things that we hear a lot from different folks is, frankly, a lot of kind of despair about, our political system and why does it matter? Why should I vote? All that sort of thing. That race was determined by what, under 100 votes?
Yeah.
I mean,
Under
that's a
100
statewide,
votes.
I mean, it's a reminder, this is not a partisan comment, this is just a good government comment, everyone needs to vote.
Yep.
Everyone, 100% needs to vote.
Yep.
That's personnel equals policy. Alright. Yes, ma'am.
Back to the sheriff's bill, there were so many different things so many bills at the same time to be tracking, especially bad bills. What is now going to happen to the sheriff? We have one sheriff in the state of Washington who does not meet that 5-year requirement in order to run as a sheriff. Is he grandfathered in? I've not been able to find any information on this. What are they going to do with him?
I have been told he is grandfathered in.
That's what
I have not
Okay.
independently confirmed that.
Yeah.
That's what I
Okay.
have been told.
Right.
By advocates of the bill. So take it with a grain of salt. Just
All right, before we take the next question, I wanted to comment too, I know Commissioner Smiley took off, but that forestry, the state lands are managed largely better, or more actively than the federal lands, but compared to private lands, they tend not to be as much. And so I'm on the Agriculture and Natural Resource Committee, and it's interesting because Commissioner Up the Grove came in and he first met with me. We were both new, and he said, I'm gonna continue the same legacy of Hillary Franz, and really no changes, we're gonna keep going the same trajectory, which, she did pretty good actually at, like Senator Short said, but that has not played out. He seems to be yielding to others, and when he comes out and you have a conversation with him, he's very friendly, and that sounds great, I'll have to see what my staff think. And he really is, I think it's like what Hunter said, it's really his staff that is running the show. But hopefully he will learn and grow into the position and things will get better, we'll see. Okay, next question.
Back to the sheriff. We're sitting here in a county, a rural county, as about 30 of our 39 counties are conservative counties. Are we painting a target on our sheriff's back just because they, we have all kinds of trouble getting our fair share of things. What's our constitutional path or legislative path to throw up so much dirt in front of these people to expose them? How do we fight now with where we're at? Give us some guidance as to what we can do to help you. Will it come from individuals? Will it come from the Sheriff's Association? Is there something you can do in the legislature to rally all of us? Because I got a feeling there's about 95% of this state that does not like this. What do we do now?
Well, there's been a few things already. So the Sheriff's Association worked real hard to try to get the governor to veto it. That didn't work. And then next, we're almost certainly going to be seeing a lawsuit that will test the constitutionality.
Who?
Hunter, have you seen? Was the
it
Sheriff's Association? I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think Waspic is helping coordinate that, but I'm not sure who else.
Yeah, and then I also expect there will be an initiative filed as well. Was there an emergency clause in that bill?
I believe so.
Yeah, so it has to be an initiative, can't be a referendum. Yeah, so, but, that's a coordinated effort that's gonna be ongoing. Yeah, I guess like we said, very political bill is really about that one sheriff. I was talking during the debate around 1 in the morning, I was talking with one of the Democrats from Pierce County, who's the chair of the healthcare committee, so I was talking to him about, more than that, it's like, how do we fix some healthcare problems? Actually, in Ponderay County, we were talking about the Ponderay County Hospital issue, and he's like, this is really dumb. I don't know why we're doing this bill. This is all about one sheriff, and we're gonna get rid of him anyway, and I don't know why I have to stay up. The main concern he had with the bill was getting to stay up until after 1 in the morning, but But nonetheless, he thought it was a dumb bill. He's like, a few members of my caucus are gonna go say, look, we got Sheriff Swank. But he really saw that as the only purpose of the bill, and I think a lot of them did, so, yeah, thanks for the question.
One thing I will say, Bill, really quickly, is that it strikes me that a potential fruitful next step might be taking a real hard look at the Criminal Justice Training Commission itself. I think it's a flaw in the structure that 90% of the members are appointed by the governor. You know, and so maybe we need to look at kind of a lot of these, frankly, that's kind of unusual, to be honest. I mean, a lot of these state commissions, everything, you've got some from the House and some from the Senate, and the representative of law enforcement, the representative of, you know, whatever. Might be time to, for the sake of good government, to take a nice, long, hard look at the Criminal Justice Training Commission.
I feel the initiative process is definitely a chance at this thing, because we're getting ready to go into our season, as it were, where we have the fairs and the rodeos and all that sort of thing. We got people that will be coming to town that we, you know, if we can do this by initiative, we need to get on that now. And I would just hope that we get direction from you, and of course, we were talking to Blakesley as well. We're looking for some guidance here, so we make a collective effort on behalf of all of us.
I certainly think so. You know, the initiative process is when the people grab the wheel and say the legislature's messed up and don't like the direction that you're taking the state. And this is an issue that cuts across partisan, usual fault lines. I mean, I think the argument would be that Democrats, Republicans, and Independents all have a shared interest in allowing their candidate that is elected to be able to serve out their term. So
One last part of the question. Was there any discussion on the floor about the fact that at this point, with everything going on in the world, that we're a border county to a whole lot of problems coming across the Canadian border? I mean, we need our sheriffs. They work with the borders, they work with the tribe. And now you're gonna interfere with that relationship at a time when we've got hundreds of mosques immediately north of the border up here.
we did talk.
Any
There
talk
was
about that?
There was discussion about the border aspects and the importance of our sheriffs again in rural communities and the outsized important role that they have in upholding law and order out here.
Good.
The international sort of dynamics were interesting. That was usually something that the other side would rally, use to kind of spin up their own troops. But yeah, it was part of the discussion.
Thank you.
And I think too, just one last point, if you notice, there's several bills that the governor really waited to sign, even though his members, well, the longer he takes to sign it, the harder it is to get your initiative signatures.
Exactly.
He did that on the sheriff's bill, and he most notably did it on the income tax bill. So it drastically shortens that time frame for people to gather signatures. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, speaking of the income tax, the millionaire income tax, do you foresee that being in front of the Washington State Supreme Court?
Totally.
So
So last week, I had a chance to be in a meeting and listen to Washington Supreme Court Justice Cheryl McLeod give a presentation.
okay.
And it was very interesting, had a little historical perspective, and our founders believed, they made a distinct decision that constitutionally, that we elect our judges. They felt that by executive appointment, there would be too much power placed in the judiciary, right? Too much influence.
Yeah.
Yet, out of the 9 Supreme Court justices that we have right now, 5 are appointed by a governor. 55.6% have been appointed by it, and she acknowledged that currying favor with an appointment or with advocacy groups paying for your campaign, that they expect preferential treatment, right? So this idea that the Supreme Court has a 6-year term, and it's quite common for them to resign before the 6th-year term, and they have to appoint a new judge. Could you kind of address that and how it may affect the outcome of this tax?
God bless you, sir. I didn't mean to ask you questions, but wow, I thank you.
You can build that.
I will, yeah, absolutely. So thank you. What a great question. This is something I talk and think about a lot, is this issue of judicial reform. So first of all, you're absolutely right on the problem. Our fathers, our constitutional founding fathers, intended for our judges to be elected. Now, we can have a discussion about whether or not that is the very best approach. At the federal level, they've got the appointment and then confirmation by the legislature or by Congress. But our founding fathers in the 1880s said we're going to elect our judges at all levels. What has happened is that, especially in the last 20 years, that principle's been completely eroded to know where now we have over a majority of our state Supreme Court as having been originally arriving at the court through appointment, either from Governor Inslee or Governor Ferguson. Astonishingly, 80% of the Court of Appeals members got there by appointment rather than election. Right, so this is a huge, huge problem. It's an open secret within legal circles and within the judiciary that, frankly, you're kind of not all that wise to run for a seat on the state Supreme Court or run for a seat on the Court of Appeals. Just, play the game and get appointed eventually, right? And that's a real problem because it creates both an appearance of impropriety if it looks like that the judiciary is basically a wholly owned subsidiary of the governor's office. But then it also, I think, undermines the Constitution itself, right? Because the people are supposed to have the voice in this, are supposed to have the determining voice in this. And the argument is made, well, okay, say Governor Ferguson appoints somebody to the state Supreme Court, that person then has to go ahead and run for the full term at the next election. That's true. But the challenge is they're the incumbent. The first name on the first word you see on the sign, in addition to return or retain, is Justice so and so. You're like, well, this person's doing the job, right? Let's keep him or her in there. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think one has been defeated that's been appointed in decades at this point. I think the last one was actually defeated. Sadly, was Justice Wiggins, who, good for him, he actually ran for the position when he originally got there. He was one of the kind of independent conservative justices, and we have very, very few of them on the court, on any level of the Court of Appeals or the state Supreme Court now. But it's a major problem. This is one of those things where people will acknowledge it. There are power dynamics in Olympia where, frankly, the governor's office likes it the way it is. But I'm going to keep pushing on it because this is people who pay attention to this really recognize that this is a giant problem. So thank you, sir.
In looking real quick before I came over here, so out of the 9 Supreme Court justices, there's only one east of the Cascades. Only one.
Yeah.
That
is a problem as well, right? So the other side often likes to talk about kind of diversity and what about geographic diversity, right? Life and frankly legal issues east of the Cascades are presented in a different light than west of the Cascades. The reason I say that is we've got different water rights issues and tribal issues, all these sorts of different things. There is a bill that was dropped last session that I supported that would require that the state be divided into geographic districts and certain members of the Supreme Court come from those areas so that we would be able to have members of the state Supreme Court from Northeast Washington, from Southwest Washington, from out on the peninsula, rather than having 8 from downtown Seattle or Tacoma and 1 originally from Spokane. Great question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, next questions.
Just for
I think this guy was next.
That's fine.
Okay, no worries. Just want to go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, how do you keep track of all the bills?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess I got blindsided basically because I have a collector vehicle. My first,
Yeah.
I spoke against that bill on the floor. That was
basically the
tracking-
state made a contract with me when I paid the money. They're rewriting the terms.
Agreed. No, that was a bad bill. It affects a very small number of people, you of which being one of them. And unfortunately, that's another one of those. There's some personality stuff in the legislature, and there's one particular member who drives a collector vehicle that is not very well liked by some people, and that bill relates to
But
him,
it looks
unfortunately.
like it's written for the insurance companies. Because that's the biggest change, is you have.
Insurance, you're right, because what it does, for those who don't know, collector vehicles, you get the plate and then it lasts for the life of the car. This bill requires you to have insurance on your collector vehicles, even if you park it in your garage like my dad, he's got a Corvette that he's drilled once when he bought it, and he's been parking in the garage for 20 years. In order to have a collector vehicle plate on there, now he has to buy insurance for that vehicle all the time in order to leave that on there. And some people thought people were abusing it, and maybe a few are. You're not supposed to use those collector vehicles to drive every day instead of buying your regular license tabs. A few people, one of the members in the legislature does that actually, and so he's a Democrat actually. So,
Yeah, you're only I can write them in.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He looks at two and two.
So, I'm sorry that happened, but,
Well, but the idea is, how do you know all these things are going on?
okay, so
I
that's
mean-
good. So the fair question, on tracking and keeping track of things. I came from the congressional world, worked for Kathy Morris Rogers for almost 8 years before coming here. In the congressional office, I thought that was disorganized. I mean, there is so much information, and we had all these systems and computer programs. And I get to the legislature, and I'm like, okay, so how do you keep track of bills? They're like, well, you don't want to do that because then it's a public record, and then you have to turn it over, and all, you know.
Oh,
And so, and then the House is really strict on what kind of technology you can use. So I use Microsoft Excel. It doesn't work wonderfully, but have it on a shared document so my assistant can see it, and then I take notes in real time on these bills. So one nice thing about it is any of you could call my office and talk to my assistant and ask her, I saw, how did Andrew vote on that bill? And she could tell you how and why I voted on every single bill I've ever taken,
that's great.
which is nice, and you can ask it in real time before. The problem with it is Microsoft Excel frequently has conflicts when her and I are both working on a document, and then we lose information. That's really depressing. But I will say that the tracking system is not the best way to track bills, but I have not found a better way yet.
So I would just say, you know, we have our staff, but we also have committee staff, and then we have partisan staff. And so in those veins, when you start seeing bills, like initially, you're kind of tracking bills in your committees, because there's so many that get introduced, and they may not ever, you may never see them on the floor. So in theory, your first focus on those are ones that you generally know are gonna impact your district. From there, we have staff who are tracking the different things. When it comes to me, because I have my floor leader position, you know, then I have separate meetings once we know certain numbers and levels of bills are coming, especially the ones that we wanna fight. You know, then we're already working on how we're gonna do that. But we have amazing people who help us, not just in our office, but actually within the Senate and the House. But there's 98 of them and only 49 of us. So I think they have a much bigger job, but they do a great job for us. But great question.
But I feel the zone was flooded this
Oh, 100%.
session. Over 1,500 bills. I mean, I don't know how you guys do it, you know, and one of my questions would be, how can we help you? Is it the way we position our comments to you? Is it getting all our friends to send articles to you? How can we help you be more successful in tilting the windmill in this, you know, People's Republic of Washington State?
I think it is very overwhelming. Okay, this was a 60-day session, which means your committees have 3 weeks to get bills heard and out of committee. Now, the chairs may decide they don't like, I had a couple of those bills, yeah, we're not gonna hear those. But generally, there's 3 weeks, and what we have found, before I answer your question, any time, they're treating it like a full 105-day session, where you get just as many bills. And the hard part, regardless of the issue, you know, I'll use the energy issue as a significant, I'm on the Senate Energy and Environment Committee, and Hunter's there in the House, is you have just tremendously impactful bills. You know, whether you're talking transmission or the type of electricity your PUD can, you know, go after as a project. And you know, they've only spent 1 meeting on it, and they're voting it out, you know, like maybe a week later. And they'll say, oh, we'll keep perfecting it, folks. That doesn't happen. If you don't get it perfected in committee, yeah, you may change it along, but my whole point is it's not deliberative anymore. It used to be you'd have work sessions on really big bills, so you'd really get people in the room, experts that are talking about this stuff. Now anymore, it's just, we're gonna have a bill hearing, you have 2 minutes to talk, and they're voting out the door. So if you're a PUD commissioner, you're like looking at this stuff going, holy cow, or a county commissioner, or even person, just maybe it's an education bill or whatever, you have very, very little time. And folks, lawmaking should be difficult because the laws that are passed in some fashion are gonna impact people. But back to your question, go at it from, you know, are there certain issues you're watching? Because it'll drive you crazy if you try to go through it all. but whatever your issues are that you're really interested in, and then do it that way. And, Andrew's talked a lot, comments are really, really good, things we can use in committee on the floor, testify, if you can be in person, great, if you can't, you can do it online.
Right.
If you're not comfortable speaking on a bill, sign in pro or con. The Democrats like to poo-poo that, but folks, it's a big deal and they watch it and so do we. So don't give up on that kind of stuff. But really do think about what you're interested in. That'll help not make it quite so overwhelming.
I think you've really hit on something interesting here, just the sheer number of bills and how we go about addressing and processing it. So, as many of you know, Washington State has what we call a citizen legislature. The idea is that we're in session, for a comparatively short period of time, and the rest of the year we go back, we live under the laws that we made, right? And see how it's working, come up with ideas for different laws or changed laws. A number of states in the country have a citizen legislature or a part-time legislature. There are some that have a full-time legislature, so California, New York, Illinois, might be seeing a pattern here, right?
Interesting, yeah.
Really big states with big governments, that sort of thing. There was a bill this session that wanted to take us either to a full-time legislature or take significant steps toward a full-time legislature. I have a different perspective. I think every second the legislature is not in session, it's another second the taxpayers are safe, right? And so,
Well put.
so I think that would be a step in the wrong direction, going toward a full-time legislature. I like the idea of trying to limit the number of bills that are introduced, really to get back to that deliberative process, which I think is so important.
Right, yeah, I've been patient, thank you
Yes.
very much.
We'll try to get to everybody, folks,
Yeah.
yeah.
Fairly new to Washington State and new to following politics, so very interested in the dynamics that are going on and very interested in the processes in Olympia. So
Yeah.
yes, 39 counties. 10 of those counties are urban counties. 29 of those counties are rated as rural, Frontier 1 or Frontier 2. District-wise legislation, there is a concentration of legislatures over in the Puget Sound area, the Vancouver area, and I think a few here in the Spokane area. So as a conservative, it's very difficult to get your views forwarded or passed in the legislation in Olympia. But I'm also a first-time rural resident. So on top of that, not only being conservative, but rural communities, getting them represented in Olympia seems to be a challenge. Now, I call your office and I appreciate it. You have awesome staff. I write your office, I call your office, but I realize that District 7 here can't push the legislation alone in Olympia. You need the support of the folks over like 47, 48, 32 in those areas. So my question kind of mirrors the two gentlemen. What can we do, say, when we walk out of here or tomorrow morning to start preparing for the 2027 legislative session? What can we do? Is there a certain community or a certain organization that we could join as a rural community organization, a farm bureau? So I'm the new guy in Lakewood. What can I do? Two things I can do tomorrow morning to get started for 2027.
Well, first of all, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Appreciate it. And thank you for being involved. It's a great question. What do we kind of do now to move ahead to 2027? From your legislators' perspectives, we often talk about that the best ideas we get from bills come from you folks. So if there are bills that you come up with, improvements to state government, please let us know. We'll get started working on that now, right? I mean, that's part of what we do over the course of the interim. As far as how you can magnify your voice, my recommendation, join some of those advocacy groups that you've talked about. Farm Bureau is a wonderful one. On Second Amendment issues, NRA is fantastic. Family Policy Institute of Washington is excellent on social issues. There's any number of different issues, organizations out there that are really helpful in amplifying individuals' voices. One thing that we often try and do and talk about is, we are at our most effective when we can build coalitions across party lines. So there are some, not many, there are some rural Democrats, and we try and work with them. It used to be, not that long ago, go back a couple of decades, there was a reasonably strong working coalition between rural and suburban representatives of both parties, and it was kind of those two largely kind of against Seattle. As Seattle's bad politics have grown, the suburbs have been kind of wiped out. So I think it's partly on us to think about how do we engage with those suburban representatives of both parties over there. That's going to be a challenge for us, but yeah, I guess that's my immediate thought is there's a number of different advocacy organizations we'd be happy to talk with you offline.
Is it appropriate to call legislators in other areas? I know at the federal level, when I write them, sometimes when I put my zip code in, it'll say, you know, it won't allow me to send information. And I don't know at the state level.
That's perfectly fine. You know, I know every legislator kind of handles it a little bit differently. So if I get legislation from outside, or excuse me, legislation, if I get a letter or an email or something from outside of the district, you know, I still usually review it. If they've got a problem, I usually try and refer them to their legislator, acknowledge the problem. If it's something I've got some subject matter expertise on, like I got a bunch of emails on the family burial ground bill, I'm not just gonna say, go talk to your legislator, because I was the prime sponsor on it. I actually have the answer, but I usually would try to loop in their legislator so that they are aware of who the point of contact is, and that
We're a very active district, 7th district, you know, we're in the interim, what's considered the interim. But we, you know, we wanna make sure we're connecting with communities, we're understanding what's going on, so there's a lot going on. There are a lot of legislators on the west side of the state in the larger areas, this is their time off. They don't do anything. I'm like, wow, okay, that just doesn't compute. But they do that. So I think your most effective piece is as we start getting towards session, because then you'll maybe have some more ideas about what people are thinking about. And you can follow it, what's the website, the address, www.ledge.wa.gov. Yeah, ledge.wa.gov. Because what they'll do, usually the beginning of December, right around now, they'll have what they call pre-filing deadline, and you'll start seeing bills that are pre-filed. They're not active at that point, but you can see what the legislators are thinking about. And so that's a really helpful source. And it'll also give you committee information. Because we're in an election year, the committees may change. The committee memberships may change. It depends on how it goes back and forth. So you may look at the committees and go, oh, I should talk to these people. They may or may not be there come January 1. Because everything gets reviewed and maybe members don't want to be on that committee anymore or something. And so it won't be updated until probably more toward mid to the end of December.
Okay, but it should be updated before the next legislative session.
Yeah, it's just sometimes it's not very much time before the legislative session starts. And it always starts the second Monday in January.
Okay.
Yeah. Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of numbers that confuse me.
Sure.
It's not a question about them. You mentioned 60-day legislative session. And then you said something about 105. Was that what it used to be?
No, it still is. It
There's
used to,
two different.
correct. The longer session is when we are supposed to do the big budget, the biennial budget. Every 2 years we do a budget. And then we never used to have the 60 days. I can't remember how long ago that was.
maybe in the 80s? 80s, yeah.
And so they added a 60-day session as kind of supplemental for emergencies, or let's just say, you know, wildfires were crazy and DNR needed funding because they had spent through everything. You might deal with that issue in a supplemental budget. Problem is anymore, they're treating every budget like a biennial budget.
Yeah.
And the same thing with legislation.
A couple of things occur to me. I mean, one is we're growing. We're a larger state than we used to be everywhere. And if we're either gonna have to limit the number of bills that are introduced, like you suggested.
Yep.
Or have a longer session to engage with the people you talked about
Sure.
in committee as you talk about these bills. Otherwise, this is ridiculous.
I actually have a better idea, but I don't know that it would go anywhere. In a 60-day session, how about we not introduce any bills and actually look at the laws that we've created and see how they're working or not working? But that would be, yeah.
And just to
Too much
clarify.
common sense.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, that 60-day session is in even numbered years, so 2026. The 105-day session is in odd numbered years. So next year will be in the 105-day session.
So you don't have them both each year?
No, that's
One's
correct.
105,
Yeah,
That's correct.
yeah, but it alternates every year.
not enough time to do work.
All right, so we're at 6:30. I know we said we were gonna go to 6:30. We can take some more questions because I know we gotta try to get through people, but I know to be respectful of your time too, is trying to speed it up a little bit. So I think you were next. You've had your hand for a while.
Okay, so this is kind of a budget question, because I'm not actually sure where we are, if that's approved or still an idea. But the 1/3 funding cut on TTK programs, transition to kindergarten, how are we protecting those current programs in our district? When sometimes that's the only game in town, there's no Head Start or no ECAP or no other option in some of those. And second part of the question, how in the 7th district can we get some of that Balmer Group funding for ECAP and expand that around here?
So when we're just finished session a couple weeks ago, so like probably like 16, 17 days ago, the budget was passed. And so haven't fully digested what exactly made it in and what didn't. Because this was a big topic. One of the things I was advocating for was, because they were talking about these across the board percentage cuts of existing TK programs, and then taking the Balmer Group to create the ECAP. A lot of our areas have one or the other. They don't have both. So it's not like you can just cut down on TTK and move them into an ECAP program. And so one of the things I was advocating for was to say, if this makes more sense, if the Balmer Group's a better way to maintain opportunities for parents and their kids, let's make sure we have flexibility, so it's not just everywhere getting the same, because a lot of places don't have one or the other. They seemed pretty open to that. It was discussion for a while. I don't know how it actually ended up. I don't know, maybe one of my seatmates knows how the final budget had it. I think there was some flexibility left.
There was flexibility left. My understanding on the TTK that they limited, so for the kiddos that are in there right now, everything's good. But it's pretty much held at that number. So if you had, families that were looking to add, have their children be in a TTK program, they probably wouldn't get there yet unless the Balmer funding kicked in. But I know at first they were gonna reduce even the programs that were already in, and then they didn't end up thankfully doing that. But the governor has up to 30 days to review the budget, so he could potentially veto sections of the bill, of the budget, and so we don't know what the final outcome's gonna be from his work. But it's a huge issue. We fought for that. They're huge programs for these kids, for the families. We're seeing wonderful results. And so we will be watching that very carefully.
Kurt?
What could be done legislatively to help protect shorelines from erosion and damage from surf boats and the large wakeboard boats?
Interesting.
Is that something that would be a legislative responsibility?
So the issue has come up, Kurt. By the way, it's really good to see you. Generally, it's more of a local, because my understanding is they're not supposed to be going fast near the shorelines, right? So then it becomes more of an enforcement issue. Like the speed limits are already there, is my understanding. It's the having the necessary number of officers that can actually just patrol that. That's my understanding, because we have had folks write in on that issue, and I was talking with the sheriff's office.
I think one of the things he's talking about, is not so much the speed limits, but the type of boat that it is. And that's those ballast boats, the wake boats,
Okay,
that create phenomenal waves, and they create phenomenal damage
okay,
to docks and
Okay.
other boats.
okay.
It's a mess.
And I'm assuming those are getting to be in greater numbers of use?
Yeah, they are, and, for example, the Padre River is quite narrow,
Sure.
and, a lot of damage to the shores because it is not a speed issue, it's a size of the wave
Okay,
issue.
I was not aware of that, okay.
This was something I was not aware of. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Should we take a couple more questions? Is that what we're looking at? Yeah.
I want to make a shameless plug on behalf of Kirk Newman, who just stood up, and these three representatives. For those of you that don't know, out of the 39 legislative districts of which there are representatives, the 7th legislative district is organized like a county party, and we're the leading district in the state for the things that we do for our legislators to help them stay in office and do this thing. So when we're working together, Kirk Newman is the chair of that currently, and we work with all 7 counties in the legislative district. Now, there's gerrymandering that Hunter can talk to you about. We've inherited the Methal Valley, and then all of a sudden we have in the 7, and talk about ground they have to cover. They gave us the eastern shore of Chelan County on the river. They gave us eastern Washington in the territory, or East Wenatchee, but not the city of East Wenatchee. So these is geographically, it is the largest, I think, legislative district, but all the other legislative districts in the state now are modeling after what we do in the 7th. Fundraising, communications, we sponsored trips back to Olympia that these folks hosted us. There's a lot of things you can do when you get together as 7 counties that carry a lot more weight than if it's just us individually. So I want to thank them, because if you get a chance to go to Olympia and see what they actually have to do, you don't want that job. You want to pay them to do it. Okay. So I just want to give a shameless plug to the fact that we are all here because we do realize that Eastern Washington is completely different than a whole lot of other things in the state, plus the border issues that we now face. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Bill, and I just wanted to clarify that this is an official government town hall, so we can't respond on the political things, but thank you for your support.
Yeah, now it's 2 things. So one with the shoreline issue, and basically it's the eroding of its shoreline. Medellin is actually going through with the conservation district right now on all of that funding, and they've scored pretty high. So they have extensive study and extensive information that might be of interest to all 3 of you, because they have a situation where it has eroded the bank so much now on the Padre River that they actually have to decommission a street. Yeah. Now there's a lot of other factors to it, right? It's never just one thing, but there's a lot of survey information that's incorporated into that project, which might give you like a head start on learning on the topic.
That was the conservation district?
Medellin is the lead basically on it, the town council.
Okay.
And they are working with the conservation district, and they've been going through a several years process of getting their project scored, and I believe it actually just got funded now, going back to my article. So the other question is there any appetite and is there any pathway to revisiting the Keeping Washington Working Act, specifically the portion that prevents our sheriffs from working with very specifically named Border Patrol? Is there any way to bring that back to the forefront and to address it, to do some, I don't know if it's an initiative or if it's a referendum or if it's just an amendment to it? I think we have plenty of examples since then, statistically, showing how much of a problem that is and how much it puts the society in danger. So is there any appetite for revisiting that?
I'll give my perspective. I think during this last session, on the other side, no.
No.
They do keep Washington working as kind of, one of their many third rails. Don't touch it. It's kind of like Climate Commitment Act. Don't mess with it, right? Part of our job during the interim is to work on these issues. And so maybe, we can have some conversations with folks, because I do know that has been a poison pill with regard to effective utilization of law enforcement, particularly with regard to the funding and access to funding for hiring additional law enforcement officers. And so that's one of the items on my list. I'm going to try and tackle the interim and potentially next session we'll have a different sort of reception on it, but at least so far, no, they don't really want to mess with it.
Okay.
In order to have a meaningful, a change to that, I think we would have to have some sort of a really super common sense solution to a problem that could get wide bipartisan support. Because the makeup of the legislature strongly favors the other side, and they're going to see anything we try to do on that to be trying to push a pro-ICE, right, that kind of thing. And I think right now it would be particularly difficult unless you have an idea that is. You can get all your Democrat colleagues in the room to support it. That'd be a good start.
Put up all the faces of the people that were, whose lives were either affected or taken away by people who were released from jail, who were on a detainer, a federal detainer, were not given over to ICE, and went out and murdered, raped, and just like blanket the wall with their faces.
And you could probably get a couple of the legislators saying, if it just keeps one from getting sick on the mask issue.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
Well, if you keep one killer out, maybe.
So who do we have that's been waiting for a while? We can try to get our last couple of questions. Who's got a burning question? Anybody else? Right here.
In April of 2024, Tennessee was the first state to pass laws prohibiting geoengineering. And Florida has passed a bill in April of 2025. Montana passed a bill in 2025 as well, as far as geoengineering. Right now, this year, 2026, Alabama has one, Iowa has one that they're considering. Kansas does, the U.S. Congress does, Idaho has a joint memorial bill, Maryland has a bill, Idaho has a second bill. Is Washington State looking at anything to prohibit geoengineering?
So I've had some discussions about this.
What is it?
Yeah.
So here would be an example of it. This is the Montana one. It bans geoengineering practices like stratospheric aerosol injection and solar radiation management, but permits cloud seeding for water resource management, introduced, so that kind of thing. It's just putting biohazardous things into the sky. We get fewer and fewer blue skies, bright blue skies, because we have so much being put into our atmosphere.
So I, this issue comes up fairly often. There's multiple pieces to it. So one, I've talked to the Department of Ecology. Geoengineering without a permit is already against the law in Washington State. The Department of Ecology tells me they've never issued a permit. They've had one application and then it was rejected. So what they said is, there's a lot of allegations of geoengineering going on without a permit, with covert operations. They said that if people call them, they do investigate them, but it's very hard to prove, and that that's the real challenge is if this is going on, it's really hard to document it well enough to actually have an enforceable action. But they said that you can let the Department of Ecology know, and they investigate every complaint. Yes.
One day I went from here to Spokane, photographing the airplanes and sending those in periodically into these environmental protection agencies, and I never get any response back.
Well, if you send a response, send it to the State Department of Ecology, and if they don't respond to you, let me know, and I'll follow up with them.
Okay.
Maybe one last question, then we'll kind of summarize, if anybody's got one. Yes, sir.
Well, go ahead.
How about you, sir, and I'll touch base with you, Kirk, after. Yeah.
Well, I don't really have I do have a question. If something happened here not very long ago, a month or two, I don't know how long, I'm a member of the Left One system.
Oh, yeah.
It came into, you know what I'm gonna mention. Left One is privately funded, has been since 1971. They did away with it in 1978. I went to work for Spokane in 1974. So this was all money that cops and firemen paid into the state. And whoever monitors that actually within the state does a pretty good job because they made us a lot of money. But what we're fearful of is the state of Washington has attempted in the past to steal money from our pension system. And we are still funded adequately. However, here just a very short period of time ago, it was never voted on, it was never talked about. Somebody in Olympia took $2 billion from our pension system. And where that money goes, your guess is as good as mine. It's like the commercial on TV. The government needs money, your money. And so they ripped to almost $2 billion from our pension system. Now, what are we gonna do to keep that from happening again? This is not, it's not taxpayers' money. This money belongs to Washington state cops and firemen. We're the ones that paid into it. The taxpayers has never taken a dime of that. But what can we do to keep that from happening again? Because I'm fearful that it's like anything. You know, once they get their fingers in the pie, they're gonna wanna do it again.
So I'll just chime in with my quick, because I imagine we all have thoughts on this. So in a session with a lot of lows, that was one of the lowest of the lows. This was really terrible. Again, a cash grab.
Yeah.
They stole the pension money, right? So what they did is I'm gonna take a step back. So you mentioned they did it without a vote. It's actually worse than that. They did take a vote. So they were able to get a majority of the legislature in both houses to agree to do that. But they swept it into the general fund, where from my perspective, it's going to be misspent. But you're right, you know, that pension fund has been well managed for a long time, so this was a good problem to have. It was just too glittering for the budget writers on the other side, so they swept the money into the general fund. Now, their perspective is that those are still state monies in effect, even though they were invested by, you know, participants in the pension program. So they've got a legal argument about why they could take it, but they just took the pension money, and now they're just gonna spend it for non-pension purposes. We argued for hours on the floor that they should not do that. Don't you dare touch the pension funds. If you're gonna take any percentage of that pension funds, at least spend it on things like wildfire prevention, right? Or at least spend it on hiring law enforcement officers. No, into the general fund and off we go.
Because anybody else in this room that has a Washington state pension, whether from the road department or fish and game or anything, if it can happen to us, it can happen to them.
No, 100%. So you ask what you can do. I think the pension council is a really important thing to stay just aware of and engaged with, because they are the ones that look at how much the pensions have gained over time. You know, the argument from their side is, well, it made so much money that we're not harming their base pension, but what does that mean? You know, so I think just having, there's pension policy staff, like staff who work for the state of Washington, along with the council, and I would highly recommend watching what they do, because these topics can come up. And you can watch it that way just to see what the discussion is.
We've got a good pension board.
Yep.
You know, and, but, you know, they can only just do it so much. They can only just do what they can do.
Well, supposedly, at least we were told that they only took it down a certain percentage, so it didn't impact, you know. But as we were debating against the bill, an amendment was introduced by a Democratic senator who brought it down even more. You know, so I just think it's something we're all gonna need to watch, because I don't like the precedent it set.
It's not gonna affect me so much,
Sure.
but it does from one side of the state to the other. There's still a large number of left-one officers and firemen.
Yep.
And they may not be affected so much, but the spouses of these officers,
Good point.
you know, that gonna be younger, And they still fall under the benefit package of that funding.
Well, I think how you fix it, we need to push to have reasonable, common sense, foundational state budgets instead of trying to be everything for everyone and just saying, what is this, what does this actually need to look like? Because of the budgets that they're doing require all of this, all of the tax money that they're just continue to raise.
So this year the budget was about $80 billion. $6 billion more than they're anticipating bringing in. $4 billion roughly of that $6 billion is coming out of that pension fund.
Yeah.
And what happens if say you have a $60,000 lifestyle and then you inherit $20,000 and you decide to make an $80,000 lifestyle with one-time funds? It guarantees you're gonna have a hole in your budget next year, right? That's exactly the concern with this. There's the principle that's very concerning, but just the practical application of taking $4 billion and using it to increase long-term program funding is just an alarming trend. How are they gonna backfill that? That's a lot of concern. But I'm just gonna go ahead and give my final closing remarks. I know you're probably all anxious to get home. Thank you all for being attentive for this whole time. It's really been a fun event, and these are great. We want to hear from everybody. We haven't actually, we have heard from a lot of you, and I know a lot of you haven't asked questions. Feel free to come up to us afterwards, or call us anytime, or if you want us to come, if you want me to come speak to your smaller group or whatever. We want you to be engaged, because that's how representative government works, is to be engaged and active. Someone asked earlier about how to be involved in the process. If you got a specific policy idea, we can work on those things. If you want to help develop policy for next session, we can't really respond to next year's policy until we find out where it's coming from. And that's one of the challenges we have, is that we often don't know. It'd be nice to have all the bills right now for next year so that we can work on it all summer long, keep an eye on things. Because some of these bills, they're coming at you so fast, and there's just not time. I tend to know the bills in my own committees pretty well, but sometimes a bill comes out of a committee and it gets to me, and I've got an hour or two or a couple of days before it's time to vote on it, and it's just really not time to work out all the kinks of every piece of legislation. So if you have ideas, I had 2 bills that I got passed this year. One was a healthcare bill for rural hospitals. In this case, it actually mostly helped the the Republic Hospital, but could affect hospitals like Newport in times in the future. There's a kind of common sense, a little bit hard to explain, allows ARPs and PAs to be the sole practitioner in an emergency department, as was happening for the last 20 years until last year when an attorney went to the Department of Health and argued that this shouldn't be allowed, and the Department of Health agreed. So we got that fixed, but that came from a constituent who was a PA who worked at the Othello Hospital, which isn't in the district, where that became an issue in Othello. He called me, and I worked on the bill. We got that passed, so that was good. Also, I got a bill to put what I call putting a warranty on license plates. Who's had a license plate where it's delaminated, looks like the paint's peeled off? This is a problem that's kind of a fun bill. Certainly not the biggest problem our state faces, but someone called me about it. They said, these used to last as long as the car. They had a 3-year-old license plate. They got pulled over for it, and they went in. It was going to be $77.25. And she's like, it feels like there should be some sort of warranty on these. I find out it costs the state $6.76. Work together a bill. But I've heard from lots and lots of people who feel like they're being gypped by the state when they have to go in. Now it's $82 as of January 1st. And so, so I went to the committees and I went to the Democrats, and I'm like, we could argue all day long about the best way to fund roads. Hopefully we can agree we shouldn't be raising extra funds because we're selling defective products and the poor people that buy it. And it worked, right? So we got the bill passed. So those are the kind of things that we can do when we're in the minority party. Just advocating for common sense, bringing in, I think there's a lot of room for us all to be effective. And with your feedback, that's how most of those things happen. We're only so smart, we only know so many things, but the collective of all of you reaching out to us with, I saw this bill, this is a concern, that's really helpful. So thank you all for being here tonight, and remember, please keep us in the loop, and if you see concerning legislation, let us know. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Just a few
few real quick thoughts here, echoing Andrew. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank our hosts, the tribe, for having us here tonight. Really appreciate it. Also want to thank local media for being here. Thank you for what you do. Really appreciate it. Kind of echoing Andrew and what Senator Short talked about before. I do want to encourage you in your thoughts about our state government. You know, it doesn't always work well, doesn't work the way we would want it to, but what your involvement really matters. It does make a difference. I promise you that. I promise you, it makes a difference. It's really, your encouragement is, you know, just so appreciated of the encouragement and the prayers that you provided for us during session. So it's an honor to represent you. Thank you all very much. Without you, Senator Short.
Just thank you so much for being here and participating with us. So thank you so much. Thank you.